And now I want to do a super quick intro because, as I said, I am going to let our panelists kind of talk a little bit about their own career journeys. But we have such a superstar panel of, um, as we said before, we all popped on, true friends of the show. Folks have been here multiple times, have been really important in various ways for our Casework Navigator program from the beginning. So, in absolutely no particular order, we have Megan Vogel was the lead immigration caseworker for Senator Sherrod Brown before leaving for Cradle Cincinnati, where she co-leads Partnering for Change, an outcome to reduce infant mortality and improve birth outcomes. So Megan can share a little bit about transitioning to healthcare. Dr. Ashley Newell was a caseworker for Rep. Todd Rokita and then Larry Buckshon before beginning her new role as executive director for the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. I'll say Ashley is also joining us from her maternity leave or recently come back from it. Oh my goodness, it's a baby. Congratulations, Dr. Newell. Congratulations, baby Newell. What a cutie. That was, I think, exactly what we all needed at 4 p.m. on this Thursday. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here. Catherine Long, who so many of you know from her time actually with us at Pop Fox Foundation working on this very program. Spent over 15 years as a caseworker and casework manager for Senator Leahy before transitioning to work in the Civil Service Department of State's PRM Bureau. Kai Gums was a legal fellow and then a caseworker for Rev. G.K. Butterfield, where he focused on BOP, EEOC, and immigration casework before transitioning to government affairs, the Ferguson Group, and then to his current role in Gov Affairs in this Cannon Center. We can talk about think tank work. We really tried to bring folks with the full spectrum of places you can go post casework here, folks. And then Megan Rickman Blackwood, well, hang on a second. Dr. Megan Rickman Blackwood, congratulations, Megan, on your recent thesis defense. Was a state caseworker and former legislative aide for State Delegate Mamie Locke, now pursuing both. I don't know how she does this somehow. This woman doesn't sleep. PhD in political science and a role as an advisor and product manager for Civic, a tech startup focusing on casework services. Last but absolutely not least because Nisha had the unfortunate experience of being managed by me 100 years ago. Nisha Suarez is the chief of staff for Representative Seth Moulton, former deputy chief, former deputy district director, former director of constituent services, where I had the extraordinary pleasure of working with her on our casework team. So quite the crew. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. Let's go down in that same order. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just share a little bit about starting from casework. Where did you go next, and how did you figure out that that's where you wanted to go, and how did you get there? Megan, let's kick it off with you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. I'm really excited about this. So yeah, I was a caseworker for Senator Sherrod Brown for 7.5 years. It was my first job out of college. I had only ever worked in public service. So when he lost, we were all kind of blindsided of, trying to find new jobs and trying to transition. And my husband and I, it just made sense for us to stay in Cincinnati at the time, but I've always worked really closely with Cincinnati Children's in a kind of a lot of different manners. So I kind of knew I wanted to transition at Children's, but I kept looking for jobs and just wasn't really finding anything that clicked until I found the job that I currently have, where I feel like it kind of really built off a lot of the casework skills that I have. But one of the hardest things, I think, when I was job searching, because it took me, I think, over 6 months to find a new job from when I lost my job to when I started my current job. It was really hard to translate, I think, what I did as a caseworker and then like what I did as when I got promoted as the lead immigration caseworker to what I do now. So it definitely was a lot of like working with people that I used to work with and like trying to like work through that. So yeah, really excited to hear about everyone else's experience today too.
Amazing. Megan, thank you so much. And I'm just putting pins and things that I think we may want to follow up on later. One thing that I know is going to come up is just how long it's going to take to find a job in this economy. Again, especially for folks where you are going to stick it out till the end with your member. If your member is retiring and you're not sure which way the election is going to go. So let's put a pin in that one. I want to make sure that we circle back there. And then we have Dr. Ashley Newell. Ashley, how did you get to the Society of St. Vincent?
So it was, my member said the January before elections that he was not going to be seeking re-election. He was going to be retiring. So we had about a full year knowing that we were going to be closing out the office. The incoming member did wait until the last minute to tell us he was not retaining anyone. So, I mean, that was his choice. It's always a possibility, unless you have that employment agreement in writing. do not assume that just because, a similar political candidate wins that you're going to be retained. So the new incoming member wanted his own people. I was not one of those that was selected. So I went home. My husband and I were going to try and do the stay-at-home mom thing. I have 2 other kiddos. This is number 3 over here joining me for the meeting. And so after renovating 2 bathrooms and ripping out all the landscaping and taking my toddlers on hikes every day, my husband said, you don't have to work for money, but you can't keep staying home because I can't afford your ideas. So actually, I was just kind of looking for something else to give meaning. I think with casework in particular, you give so much of yourself and you really try and help a lot of people. And so I wanted something that had meaning, and I had seen a bulletin in my church Sunday bulletin. I saw a little advertisement that said they were looking for, of all things, a food pantry manager. And I was like, okay, that's just enough to feel like I'm doing meaning and use my skill set, but it's not so much that's going to pull me away from my kids in these really crucial years. And I went and I had the world's worst interview with the organization, and I got a call back 2 weeks later, and I thought for sure it was like a cursory call of like, yeah, no, not at all. This was a terrible interview, and it was. And they said, actually, can you come back? And I said, oh my goodness, they lost my application. They don't remember that I'm the awful interview. Absolutely, I'll go back in. And they offered me this job as executive director, overseeing 18 works, including a pantry. So I actually got a higher position than what I had offered for. Being a lifelong cradle Catholic, it was a great use of my values and morals, but also having the insight of that congressional casework. And I will say, in this particular charity space, the overlap has been, it's been substantial overlap. But what I really like is, I think if I had come into this position from college, I would have been floundering a little bit more. Instead, having that casework background, I knew where to go because I'm one of the community resources I would refer to myself when I did casework. So now I'm one of those places I referred when I couldn't fill the gap for cases on the official side. So, and then 9 weeks and 2 days ago, I had this chunk. So this is Jackson.
Oh my gosh, hi Jackson, look at those cheeks.
Yes, he was 9 pounds and he is now 12 and he wears 6-month onesie. He's huge.
We support this. This is Chalky. Oh my God, chubby babies are the best babies. Ashley, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And again, a couple of threads to pull on there that we could talk about. Navigating casework and job transitions while parenting. I know a lot of folks are in that position. That's an extra level of difficulty. How to handle interviews. Sounds like it felt like it didn't go well and you actually smashed it. So confidence, building up that interview muscle again, if it's been a long time. And then also how to use your current casework network to figure out where you want to go. All incredible. Thank you so much. And then let's go over to Catherine. You have really kind of seen, speaking of using your network and the skills that you built up as a caseworker, you really kind of been through a few transitions. So love to hear about the journey.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. I was with Senator Leahy for 15 years, starting most of that time as a caseworker in veterans housing, military, and IRS. But I had come to Senator Leahy having been a Peace Corps volunteer out of college, and then in human services, and then in public policy. It was kind of like my third little chunk of career. It was a great job. I really mastered the work, I think, over 15 years, and there were many things that I enjoyed about it. But when Senator Leahy announced his retirement after 48 years, I thought, I don't think I really want to do this work for another office at the time. And so I set about, we found out about a year ahead. And then I started thinking, okay, what could I do? And I was within 3 years of hitting 20 years. So that got me thinking, along with COVID and work from home, that maybe I could explore the limits of my ambition in Washington, D.C. And I decided to pursue that through the civil service, which was, turns out, not an easy choice. 100 job applications starting in July. And by, December, nothing had quite gelled. And I really enjoyed the opportunity of staying with him until the end of his term. There were a lot of really interesting, felt good to be part of that. But as we were getting close, that was when Popbox was launching the Casework Navigator program. And I heard about it and I was like, gosh, that's like, suddenly someone's talking my language. And so I reached out to Anne and I said, I think I'm going to have a little time while I'm waiting for this civil service thing to gel. And she invited me to serve as a fellow with the program, which really helped me bridge the time between getting my initial job offer in the civil service and, starting in, and plus it was an amazing experience that I truly enjoyed and appreciated. But eventually I landed at the State Department in the Refugee Admissions Program. And that was going along quite nicely. I started as program analyst. They asked me to manage the budget, which was a $3.1 billion budget. No problem. I'm a caseworker. I can handle that. So I put to use, my budgeting skills from my graduate degree 20 years earlier, and we did great work, settled 125,000 refugees or in about that amount of time. And then it all came kind of crashing to a halt in July, leaving me 6 months short of my 20 years. And so then I started the whole process all over again. And then had a great opportunity to do several different things around casework capacity. And I'm now currently working with a fabulous office, helping support their team for a time-limited period that will get me to my 20 years. So I'm not sure what's next, but that's my long story. And I'm happy to share more about particularly the civil service process too. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Catherine. And the threads, I want to put pins in here of 100 applications for one job. Sometimes it's a numbers game. So I want to talk through that. The cold email, the art of the cold email of hey, I'm curious about what you do and I'm looking for my next thing. So let's chat. That's definitely an art form. Amazing, Catherine. Thank you so much. And then speaking of nonprofit world, fellowships in nonprofit world, Kai, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Kai Guns. My journey was a little bit different. I started with Congressman Butterfield per a law school internship, where I started as a legal fellow for him. And then I decided midsummer 2019 not to go back to law school for a little bit because, as some of you may know, it's expensive. So I decided to stay with Congress for a little bit, and ironically, 3 months after starting, North Carolina ended up in their redistricting fight, which some of you may be caught up in right now in your own districts. And our district got redrawn, which forced Congressman Butterfield to decide not to run again. With that decision being made, I was faced with two options. One, I had the option to go work for the Joe Biden 2020 campaign or go back to law school. The pandemic created a kind of interesting scenario, which allowed many law schools to postpone their deadlines at that time. And I was faced with two choices. I had always known that I wanted to go into law school. Go back to law school. While with Congressman Butterfield, I handled Bureau of Prisons work, EEOC work, and immigration work, and a lot of that came from my previous experiences with the NAACP, as well as the U.S. State Department and the AFL-CIO. So I had a lot of background in the grassroots space as well as the advocacy space, and it fit really well with the casework portfolio that we had. As this makes relevant for people who may be looking for other jobs and moving out of the space, how I really looked at it was I am a bankruptcy attorney by trade. But they're in the bankruptcy space. We always talk about the effects to and connections to opportunity and socioeconomic growth. And naturally that led me back to policy. And so I worked for the Ferguson Group as a contract lobbying firm fresh out of law school. But I always knew I wanted to get back into the policy space, get back to the Hill where the real changes were being made, and having the conversations and on my own terms with the members that I knew were doing the good work. And that's what led me to the nonprofit space, a different angle than most lawyers would assume you can take, and a different angle than a lot of caseworkers think as they go to Case Street and so on, which is always a good move. But I decided to get into this space a little bit more to get more hands on the policy work and to apply the legal background as well as the congressional background that I formed in the casework area while I was with Congressman Butterfield. So hopefully that summarizes it really well. I'm happy to answer questions around my thinking there.
Super helpful, Kai. Thank you. Again, pulling stuff out here. It's like when I am getting cold outreach from caseworkers, it's never cold outreach. You're always welcome to reach out to me, folks. My email is all over everything. This is one of the biggest transition areas that I think I hear from is caseworkers who say, I'm so fed up with handling this case over and over. I want to move into policy. I want to fix this at a structural level. So I am anticipating we're going to get some questions there. And then actually comment to Catherine and Kai as well as the transition from district-based casework to DC. And Nisha, I know we're going to get to you to talk about that as well. I think that's a huge transition for folks to contemplate. So definitely pulling pieces out here. And then from there, we have casework not only into policy, but also into academia and civic tech, which I would love to see more caseworkers think about. Megan, you're up.
Yeah, so actually that was like a great intro, Kai, because when I was working in the state and doing anybody that knows state work at all, you do all the things, right? So as a caseworker, one of the things that was really struck me was just the need for system design, not only for managing the case itself, but also aggregating that information and using it for either outreach or oversight moving forward, right? And then the second thing was understanding in that space that we had all these amazing stories that were kind of anecdotal stories from casework and stuff. But when it came time for those to affect policy, oftentimes there were people in the room that had a really great one sheet with a lot of stats on it. And that was who was driving policy forward, right? Even though caseworkers were reporting information from individual cases. So I decided in that space that I really needed to go back to school in order to create the things I needed to do my job. So I went back to grad school at UNC. I went straight into a PhD program. To be completely transparent, I was entirely planning on doing a master's, but as Kai spoke to so brilliantly, education's expensive. And if you go to a PhD program that has a master's in passing, they'll pay you to be there. So that's what I did. And then I guess I just got stuck and I loved it. And so I just finished my PhD. And in the time that I've been here, not only have I been able to really create new knowledge around casework, but also I was able to meet a group of people that were working on a product that really was in that first lane of system design, thinking about how the CRMs are built, and most all of them are going to be really great for your comms team. It'll be pretty okay for your policy team, and casework is kind of on the back burner. And just really thinking through how to create a product that is casework forward, both in its support and also the information that is being aggregated and drawn out of the work that you guys do. It is so imperative to good office functioning and good representation, and it's really often overlooked. So thinking about both in my academics, pushing for this to be taken more seriously, and then in my work now with Civic, thinking about how we can provide the best product to allow that
knowledge that you guys are already creating to be just easier for use for your office. I think that's it.
Amazing. Thank you, Megan, and congratulations again. That is such a
Thank-
huge achievement. One thing to definitely pull out here is this is an incredibly well-educated panel. We have 2 doctorates and at least 3 master's degrees, a law degree. So I think one thing we always hear about is, hey, I'm thinking about my next step. Like, should I pursue a graduate degree? Should I, or a postgraduate degree? So definitely let's keep that one in the hopper. I know that's a huge question for folks. And then last but not least, Nisha, staying in congressional space, but actually moving up into senior leadership and also moved to DC. How'd you get there?
Well, I did have to drive and it was such a pain.
That sounds terrible.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for being here. And caseworkers on the call, are you breathing? Are you taking a breath? Are you taking care of yourself? I know my caseworkers are having a little bit of a tough time right now, but you know, it's just something that we have to push through. And I'm glad to see you made time for yourself today. So that's always a huge positive. And thank you, Anne, for giving us all this space. Yeah, so I'm here in DC right now. I'm physically in Longworth. Come by and see me anytime. I started up in the district office all because of Anne Meeker. Anne took a chance on me and hired me to be an immigration caseworker, and that was almost 8 years ago, which is crazy to think about. And then when Anne left, I became director of constituent services. Thank you for giving me that title and responsibility right before COVID. It was exactly a month before, and then going off the grid. But no, I mean, honestly, I think what Catherine was talking about, you know, they gave me a $3.1 billion budget, and I said, well, my caseworker, that's what was in my notes. I mean, life is definitely all about rising to the timing and the challenges that you're faced with, and caseworkers know that better than anyone else. We don't have a choice but to face the big scary thing for our constituents and for ourselves. So for me, I had 2 experiences. One, I mean, pretty much in an 8-month span. It was, you know, the summer of 2021, and then early 2022. And in the summer of 2021, my district director was on a sabbatical and said, can you do X, Y, Z? And we split responsibilities between me and a regional director. And I just ended up stepping up and doing whatever I could. And then our chief went on maternity leave in early 2022. And so I took on, as being up in the district as director of constituent services, I took on our entire budget, our personnel, because I had nothing else to do at the time. And really, it was just like some of it was like naturally given and assigned to me as they were out, but some of it was I saw it wasn't being done, or I thought that I could fix something, and so I really tried to step up and fix those things. I would say a thing about caseworkers and about, I think, congressional offices in general, and sometimes about women, and we can talk about that separately, is that we say yes to a lot of things, even though we're not paid to do it. And so I don't want the lesson here to be do everything and don't get paid for it. I think there are natural spaces where if there are voids, you should step up and try to fill them, but don't overextend yourself. So there's a little bit of touch point there. I did move to DC when our chief left, and then our district director became a district chief, and we just needed somebody to run the DC office. So that was about 3 years ago. And then I became chief in October of last year when our chief left. So definitely happy to answer any questions. I think there's a lot of lessons from everybody that spoke before me, but I think I learned from my junior and entry-level staff every day too. So I'm sure that there are questions that are out there that I haven't heard yet. So I'm excited to talk to you all.
Amazing, Nisha. Thank you so much. And I really can only apologize for leaving right before the pandemic. I didn't know it was coming. I'm sorry. You nailed it.
It's okay. Thank you.
Really terrible timing. Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. This has been so incredibly helpful. Again, I think it's just nice as a caseworker. You don't necessarily get to meet people who did this job previously. So I hope this has been helpful for folks in just seeing the breadth of places that casework can take you. Although, as we've covered, it's not always an easy road to get from point A to point B. One thing again, and folks want to make sure this is your time, it is as useful as possible. So please drop any questions in the chat, and I will do my best to traffic cop and make sure we get to everybody here. But one place I'd love to start, actually, Nisha, you transitioned us in a perfect way. Catherine, you did too. Everyone here did as well. But really thinking about the strengths that you build up as a caseworker. Again, it's such an incredibly unique job. It's such a challenging job. Some of the things you all have mentioned or brought up in particular, there's the problem solving, there's the confidence in your ability to problem solve, which is its own thing. There is an incredible work ethic. There's that drive towards service. Like, these are all really important things that aren't necessarily how we think of ourselves day to day in the moment. So for anyone who'd like to start here, as you were approaching job applications, you were approaching a resume, a cover letter, how did you approach framing your casework experience and framing your casework skills as you thought about your next thing? What worked or what didn't work?
I think I'll jump in. I am constantly learning what I don't know. And, in the rearview mirror, once I was at the State Department, there were a couple of things that I realized. And one of them was that my congressional experience on its face was not as sought after as I thought it might be. And in some ways, I think that in particularly in a highly politically charged executive branch office, it could be seen as more of a liability than, and so I think it might have been helpful to have done, more networking sort of peer to peer. It was also a little challenging to figure out what level to be targeting, whether, in the GS system, like at 11, is it 13, is it 14? But I think that the one thing, and I'm hopeful that, federal hiring at some point will improve and folks, here in the room can start to explore that as another option. But I think looking at the more analytical roles in addition to like the public affairs, congressional relations roles, because I think so much of the skills that you learn as a caseworker are those analytical. I think program manager, those kinds of skills and thinking about how you translate the things that you do in terms of problem solving, agency relationships, understanding program operations are things that I think that it is a challenge to learn to translate all of that.
I'll like jump right in on that because I think you guys are doing, or every case is different. And a lot of times there's not a standard set of call this person, do this thing, right? You are looking up information, you're finding programs, you're finding who to contact. This is a lot of like research skills that like we wouldn't necessarily classify that way. But if you wanted to like put it in like academic terms, you're doing like case level analysis on each time you're doing something. And I think a lot of that work kind of gets overlooked for some of the other things you're doing, but it really does position you well to transition into like an analysis role or going into academia and doing research, because you guys are already really good at what you're doing. You already know how to like look around and find something out. What is F around and find out? You guys are masters at effing around and finding out, right? So go get a degree in it.
I would also piggyback off of that, Megan, and say that in addition, what it does is it allows you to practically apply what the policy positions that you have taken or where you are or where you ended up in your new role, whether it be academia or another position, what you're pushing, you're able to see the effects or understand the effects a little bit more than some who are just writing the policies and saying, oh, this should work this way, or who just have a degree. Caseworkers, even for congressional staff, we all say, and for those of us who've been in the district, always say a congressional office lives and dies by the caseworkers and the staff and the ability for them to respond. And that speaking and that those actions mean something because we're the ones on the ground that have seen what the effects of the chaos in DC are in our districts and the good DC can do and how to better utilize that. Most of us, especially for those of us who've been in BOP or EEOC, we had specific contacts. We didn't use the generic stuff or the sheets with the numbers on it. We had a person that we called or emailed to get an answer quickly. And those relationships allow us, when we do transition, one, you keep those relationships, but two, just on a more practical level, you're able to apply a lot faster what you're learning.
I want to jump off of everybody else's points that they're piggybacking off of. Casework is so multifaceted that when I was applying for jobs outside of government, I was often having to create entirely new resumes tailored to explain and extrapolate out for the niche of that job, which you would think if you just lay out everything that you handle as a caseworker, people would be like, oh, this is amazing. But what I found had the most success and the most callbacks and the most second interviews and the most, follow-ups was actually just condensing everything down to one facet of a very multifaceted job. I look back at the amount of money that I was responsible for, overseeing, or the amount of emergency work or creative problem solving, or all of these things that we were doing on the fly, literally creating systems on the fly. And you take that to, a mid to high level executive position, and people are like, well, how does that translate for me? And you really have to not only lead that horse to water, you kind of have to shove its head under. So I found that I had the most success in that one, of taking this very impactful, multifaceted job that no one's ever heard of, that nobody understands, that nobody can appreciate the nuance of. And I was having to take just little tiny pieces, and that had the most effect with potential employers.
To Ashley's point, I took note. I went through my resume that I had in the Senate forever, because I worked for Jared for so long. And I went through and made note cards of each thing that I had described as my skill set. And I translated it so that it would make more sense in a different setting. So that way it was actually more palatable for other jobs and other job applications. And it made more sense to folks, because I could, expand on it during a job interview, but it wasn't necessarily something that I needed to have in a resume. And it took me, I think I ended up having 6 versions of a resume before I finally had one that I settled on that actually got me a job. So
that is so helpful. And again, we're hearing like volume, like you need 6 versions of a resume. Like, don't be afraid of doing that work. We'll say again, we are in a fascinating, brave new age. You have LLM friends, you have Claude and ChatGPT that can take a lot of that work off of your plate. One thing I also wanted to follow up on, again, we touched on it briefly here, was that question of a degree, and where and when is a degree helpful in helping you make that bridge or add something else to your resume that's going to get you from casework to what comes after. So again, noting the extraordinary academic well-roundedness of this crew, what advice would y'all have for a caseworker who's saying, I think my job is ending, I'm considering a postgraduate degree or considering a grad degree? Good idea, not a good idea. When is it a good idea?
Oh man, I'm going to be the most anti-education up here, I bet. So for me, my education was beneficial to getting me into the House and getting me a chance on the Hill. Once I had work experience, it was not as impressive. For me, the education showed that I had the commitment to see something through. And then, my degree is in linguistic anthropology. That's what my doctorate is in. And now I run the largest nonprofit in the tri-state area. Doesn't exactly mean that I used my education in that way. It was not necessarily linear. So showing the dedication, the perseverance, the ability to see something through to the end is very important. That said, your life is never going to line up for a perfect time for anything. Number 3 was after my first week on the job. I then had to go tell my new boss, hey, by the way, I'm pregnant. So there's never the perfect time for anything. If it is something you want to do, I say absolutely go for it, because it is never going to line up. There's always going to be challenges. And I feel like the stumbling blocks and the roadblocks only get bigger with time. So if you have a window of availability, see it through. You can always stop something. You can always take a pause. You can take a break. Restarting it or getting back into the groove or pursuing it for the first time is so much harder. So if you have that window and you have that drive, absolutely shoot for it. But if you're wanting to get a degree just to have letters after your name, no, it's not going to be for you.
Yeah, I would agree that like it is something you have to really, really want. And for me, it was just really chasing knowledge that didn't exist yet, right? And I think that what I will say is, again, I really want to encourage people to think about like PhD programs with masters in passing, right? So that if you do decide you want to drop out after 2 years, you have a degree and an extra letters after your name, right? It wasn't for nothing. But also, if there are so many facets of what you guys do, there are so many rabbit holes to go down. I went thinking I was going to study a particular issue that was really prevalent in Virginia. And I realized that casework hadn't been studied in 40 years, right? So I had to lay that groundwork first. The door is wide open, you guys. Like you could go and it would be I think it would be a novel and interesting research agenda for a lot of poli-sci programs, public administration programs, for the people that do more Medicaid type of the health stuff going into Masters of Public Health. They are looking for people that have more lived experience. I think Kai said something about this earlier, but like having the experience on the ground is way different than somebody just coming in and reading about it. So if anybody is even remotely interested in pursuing higher education, I can say without a doubt, as somebody like leaving academia right now, we need you desperately because like no matter how much you read about this stuff, it's not the same as being on the ground. And whether it's following a policy rabbit that you fell in love with while you were working or studying something about the job that you do and how that affects people, like we need you now more than ever. So it's just my plea to come join us.
And Anne, I want to jump to leverage on those points to say to you that, you know, the job market is difficult right now. And I know in my experience, I went to graduate school at 30 to get an MPA and I got a full ride. So I think that if folks are considering it, it's a very reasonable reaction to the market to take, you know, to take a pause, to, you know, see if you can get in a fully funded program, sit out for a year or two, build your network, and that you also have the, you know, again, kind of if you think at all about civil service, potentially, then you can tap into the hiring preferences that come for, you know, recent grads. When I was doing all my job networking, and I'm what, you know, may not be obvious, but, you know, already in my 50s at this point, and someone said to me, maybe you should go back to school so that you can get, you know, a pathways internship into the federal government. And I already have my master's. Thank you. Appreciate that. But I'll take my chances with the public pathway. But, you know, but it does have that advantage. So if you're like mid-career-ish, it could be a real benefit.
To piggyback off of you, Catherine, I actually agree with you really well. And I went to law school. I like this question because it makes me think back to going to law school. And I actually went to law school, which is a little different than others for the reason of specifically going back into policy. So I went to law school. I became certified in bankruptcy, but at the same time, bankruptcy was the only I mean, you have criminal law, you have family law, but bankruptcy was the only one that touched people's daily lives, finances, the immigration status, criminal status, every aspect of the law was touched. And so that's how I kind of used my 3 years in law school to kind of gain the practical legal experience, but also where I could apply the legal knowledge I have toward advancing policy, which is why even here in the nonprofit space, I help our legal team file FOIA requests and other things as well. I advise Capitol Hill Council as well on legislative language, which law school helped with that as well, tighten up that stuff. So I always an advocate for going back to school. I am an advocate only though if you see that there's a direct benefit. I'm never an advocate for going back to school just because you think it's the next step that'll get you to the next thing. Because it's expensive and it takes time, and people may not really have that when they're taking care of families and worrying about what they can take care of for themselves. So I am all in support of whatever track, but I do advise that you try to link it to what your overall goals are first.
And I think I would be like Celeste just said something about cost and stuff, particularly like older forgiveness programs and things like that. I think I would be remiss not to say that they have recently changed the rules on how much you can borrow for grad school, right? So I know that can really drastically change people's calculations. So speaking to what Catherine said, like find a program that's funded. There are programs, I mean, again, education's getting hit too now, but there are programs out there that are looking for people. And to say it one more time, like they are looking for people that are coming with a already developed skill set. So they kind of know where your research agenda is going to be and what you're going to do with your work. Those are the types of students that are looking to invest in right now.
And depending on the kind of graduate education you're getting, I actually negotiated with my university to raise my external grant cap allowance in order to retain a greater portion of my intellectual property. So you can actually negotiate for your tuition, essentially. So don't take the bottom line as the ultimate bottom line, because at the end of the day, the university would rather have 60% of tuition guaranteed to them than no tuition.
On that, anyone else on postgrad degrees? I'll say I have a useless master's and would definitely +1. Everyone has said, like, don't do this without a good idea. Y'all, my master's degree is in empires, colonialism, and globalization. I don't know what I was thinking this would be helpful. So don't do a master's degree because you don't know what you're doing. Figure out what you're doing and then find the master's degree for sure.